The video shows faces of MCIL consumers, friends, and staff over the years from 1985 to present. ADA 30. The Memphis Center for Independent Living looks at 30 years of disability rights. Disability and the disability rights movement are a unique part of the American experience. And the Memphis Center for Independent Living celebrates what our community can accomplish because of the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act. 30 years ago, on July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed the ADA into law. The disability rights law prohibited discrimination against people with disabilities in employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services. The ADA, though, redefined discrimination to include inappropriate institutionalization, giving us the right to live, work, and play like everyone else. MCIL celebrates this landmark legislation, the basis of our civil rights protection, and the very American ideal to include everyone in the community. At a time when America is struggling with overt and systemic discrimination, the ADA represents a great promise of equality for all citizens. Even with the ADA, the mission continues for the Memphis Center for Independent Living to facilitate the full integration of people with disabilities into all aspects of community life. The Center is working to build on our work from before the ADA to the current progressive ideas of people with disabilities struggling to be a vibrant part of civic life. Back in 1978, a group of people with disabilities in Denver, Colorado blocked buses demanding ramps and equality in transportation. The direct action resulted in Denver purchasing accessible buses and having an accessible system in place by 1983. But here in Memphis, there was no direct action and no demand for equality. It's only with the 1990 Americans with Disabilities Act that eventually resulted in accessible buses in our city. Likewise, other American locations began to offer home and community-based services so people with disabilities could live and work in the community. In Tennessee, only a tiny percentage of people could get services in the community. Our state spent over 90% of federal funds on expensive nursing homes, and it was the default for services for people with disabilities. People with disabilities of all ages, teenagers and younger even, would live out their lives in institutions in our state. Deborah Cunningham, the longtime head of MCIL, began to help people with disabilities to leave institutions here in Memphis and live independently. Sometimes she would help people to leave a nursing home in Memphis to live in their own apartment in Colorado where they could get services. Like the Underground Railroad that went before to give people independence, MCIL helped 16 people to live independently and not in an expensive institution. In 2014, one of the people who had moved to Colorado on the Underground Railroad came back to MCIL to help train state employees and other transition service workers. He had left a Memphis nursing home with nothing, and he came back to town driving his own accessible van. He had to take time off of work, but he also had to return to Denver soon because he was closing the next week on an accessible home. MCIL led the community in demanding equality in transportation since the passage of the ADA. Deborah Cunningham loved movies, and it's no surprise that MCIL led the way to make movie theaters in Memphis have reasonable access. Since the passage of the ADA, MCIL has been closely involved with individuals and system compliance of the federal disability rights law. In MCIL versus Grant, the center brought suit against a local business for failing to comply with Title III of the ADA and parts of the Fair Housing Amendment Acts of 1988. The suit was joined by the United States of America and settled in 2007. MCIL was also central in the complaint Utila v. Memphis. Several consumers and staff of MCIL sued the city of Memphis for lack of curb ramps. MCIL's dedication to equal protection and ADA Title II compliance is evident and ongoing all over the city, where you see accessible curb ramps are still being built. More importantly, MCIL has remained the pulse of the disability rights community in the Memphis area. Memphis activists have worked with TennCare and the state of Tennessee for equal access to services in the community. MCIL today works to move people out of expensive institutions and into independent living in the Memphis community. The Memphis Center for Independent Living asks you to celebrate the Americans with Disabilities Act with us today. The center recognizes that we have a lot of work to do, and there is still a long way to go. Today, we want to commemorate 30 years of progress that we have all made, not just for people with disabilities, but for all who are marginalized in our community.